been a freelance, a rolling stone, and a shaman, as distinct from a priest. For the shaman gets his magic alone in the mountains and forests, whereas a priest gets his from being ordained by a guru or bishop. The first, the shaman that is, goes with the culture of nomads and hunters, and the second with cultures of agrarians or industrialists. Although I am unofficially and on the side an ordained priest of the Anglican Communion, my genes must have come from the nomads of Europe, and my reincarnation from the Taoist poets of China, or the Yamabushi or mountain hermits of Japan. I'm gregarious, but I like to be left alone. My existence is a coincidence of opposites. On the one hand, I'm a shameless egotist. I like to talk, entertain, and hold the center of the stage. On the other, I realize quite clearly that the ego named Alan Watts is an illusion, a social institution, a fabrication of words and symbols without the slightest substantial reality. Nevertheless, I know too that this temporary pattern, this process, is a function, a doing, a karma, in just the same way as the sun, the galaxy, or shall we be bold to say Jesus Christ or Gautama the Buddha?
I like it. It's mine. The prices blow my mind. I feel so rich.
How can
Okay, we're gonna end this John Kitover.com movie. (7/9/24) Tuesday.
Your call has been forwarded to voicemail. The person you're trying to reach is not available.
I say this without offense, without seeming proud, haughty, and pretentious? I simply and even humbly know that I am the eternal. Yet, the idea of my coming on as a messiah or great guru just breaks me up with laughter. Because, at the same time, I am an unrepentant sensualist. I am an immoderate lover of women and the delights of sexuality, of the greatest French, Chinese, and Japanese cuisine, of wines and spirituous drinks, of smoking cigars and pipes, of gardens, forests, and oceans, of jewels and paintings, of colorful clothes, and of finely bound and printed books. I have also an attraction to being a no-strings-attached Taoist wanderer in the mountains, cloud-hidden, whereabouts unknown. And when the mood suits me, I also like to practice Buddhist meditation in the Zen or Tibetan Dzogchen style, which is simply sitting quietly or walking rhythmically without thoughts or verbalizations in your head. Walking meditation I have always preferred to long periods of sitting, for one reason. When walking, there is no need for others to know that you are meditating and thus to feel guilty or embarrassed for not doing likewise. For the self-consciousness of sitting in a special way, of having a special time or place for the practice, does not obtrude itself. Thus, I could go out for a walk under the pretext of taking the air or pace the floor, seeming to be thinking out a book, and yet be absorbed in mystical silence of the mind. And oddly enough, at the same time, it didn't really occur to me that I was practicing meditation. So that I've always considered myself rather lazy and haphazard in respect of this discipline. I didn't think of myself as doing an exercise, but simply as exploring a state of consciousness out of sheer interest. A Christian writer has said that the monk prays best who does not know that he is praying. I see religion as I see such other basic fascinations as art and science, in which there is room for many different approaches, styles, techniques, and opinions. Thus, I am not formally a committed member of any creed or sect, and hold no particular religious view or doctrine as absolute. I deplore missionary zeal and consider exclusive dedication to and advocacy of any particular religion as either the best or the only true way, an almost irreligious arrogance. Yet, my work and my life are fully concerned with religion, and the mystery of being is my supreme fascination. If I'm asked to define my personal tastes in religion, I must say that they lie between Mahayana Buddhism and Taoism, with a certain leaning towards Vedanta and Catholicism, or rather, the Orthodox Church of Eastern Europe. The Russian cathedral in Paris is, for me, one of the most joyous shrines in the world. But I'm still more at home in the serene and non-militant atmosphere of such Buddhist sanctuaries as Koyasan and Chionin, where the deep and sonorous chant is measured by the easy pulse of a wooden drum, where pines and maples stand beyond the open screens, and the smoke of aloes wood, incense, hangs in the air. When I was about 17, I was still reading Suzuki on Zen and trying to practice some form of Buddhist yoga, Zazen or Satipatthana. I simply couldn't make up my mind which specific method to follow, or exactly what state of consciousness was Satori, Samadhi, Moksha, or true enlightenment. I had no spiritual master. I was a shaman on my own, in a religious jungle. When at Canterbury in England I had become the head boy of my house, I had the privilege of going off by myself to study and meditate in an ancient Elizabethan room, where one could light a fire and stay up until late at night. It was in the autumn of 1932, windy, with fallen leaves skittering along the roads and fields. And I was trying desperately to work out this problem. What is the experience which these Oriental masters are talking about? The different ideas of it which I had in mind seemed to be approaching me like little dogs wanting to be petted, and suddenly I shouted at all of them to go away. I annihilated and bawled out every theory and concept of what should be my properly spiritual state of mind, or of what should be meant by me. And instantly my weight vanished. I owned nothing. All hang-ups disappeared. I walked on air. And thereupon I composed a haiku, all forgotten and set aside, wind scattering leaves over the fields. And one evening, when Eleanor, my first wife, and I were walking home from a meditation session at the Buddhist Society, I began to discuss the method of concentration on the eternal present. Whereupon she said, "Why try to concentrate on it? What else is there to be aware of? Your memories are all in the present just as much as the trees over there. Your thoughts about the future are also in the present. The present is just a constant flow, like the Tao, and there's simply no way of getting out of it." With that remark, my whole sense of weight vanished. You could have knocked me down with a feather. I realized that when the Hindus said, "Tattvamasi," you are that, they meant just what they said. For a whole week thereafter, I simply floated, remembering my friend Professor Spiegelberg's telling me of the 6 precepts of the Tibetan master Tilopa. No thought, no reflection, no analysis, no cultivation, no intention. Let it settle itself. Now, this was doubtless a premature satori, for I was unable to resist the temptation to write, think, and intellectualize about it. Yet when I'm in my right mind, I still know that this is the true way of life, at least for me. Conscious thought, reflection, analysis, cultivation, and intention are simply using the mind's radar or scanning beam for purposes which the mind as a whole can do of itself and of its own with far more intelligence and less effort. So, from the beginning, I was never interested in being good at Zen in the sense of mastering a traditional discipline, as for example, in studying the piano with Schnabel, to the point where my recordings of the Beethoven sonatas would be indistinguishable from his. I had already done that kind of thing. And the point here is not to boast, but to explain the real nature of my interest in Zen. For I had, without any formal teacher, unquestionably mastered the art of public speaking, and in the church had become as expert a liturgist as anyone. What I was after was therefore not so much discipline as understanding. And so far as I was concerned, the formal study of Zen was a kind of busy behavior, to sit hour after hour and day after day with aching legs, to unravel Hakuin's tricky system of dealing with koan, to subsist on tea, pickles, and brown rice, or to master Dogen's ritual style of life was, although as good in its own way as learning to sail, not what I needed to know. What I saw in Zen was an intuitive way of understanding the sense of life by getting rid of silly quests and questions.
Simplify your social media game with Semrush Social. Be everywhere your audience is with seamless platform.
The archetypal situation was when Hueca asked Bodhidharma how to attain peace of mind. Bodhidharma said, "Bring your mind out and I will pacify it." "But when I look for it," said Hueca, "I can't find it." "In that case," the master concluded, "it's pacified already." Isn't that crazy? It is thus that almost every morning when I first awaken, I have a feeling of total clarity as to the sense of life. A feeling of myself and the universe as a matter of the utmost simplicity. I and that which is are the same. Always have been, always will be. There's simply nothing special to be achieved, realized, or performed. The sound of a frog jumping into an old pond is plop, in Japanese, mizu no oto. This plop isn't physical, material, mental, or spiritual. For plop isn't a philosophical category. Plop is just plop. This is the simplest thing in the world, but the hardest to explain. If you understand it, you can see that this plop is all of a piece with 1,000 galaxies.
This is WBAI in New York. You're listening to In the Spirit, and Alan Watts is with us and has been reading from his own autobiography in his own way. He's reading in his own way from his own, which Pantheon Books has just published. Well, Alan, what do you think of your autobiography?
Well, it was a very difficult thing for me to write, and I wrote it at the insistence of my editor, Paula Maguire at Pantheon, and my wife. I said, what should I be doing writing an autobiography? I haven't been a man of adventure. I have achieved no great deeds in life. I have not become extremely wealthy. I have not been an explorer or a great warrior or an adventurer. I've been a rather sedentary character because I was brought up really to be a Brahmin, an intellectual, and so I thought, I can't write a thing like that. But they went on insisting, and so I put myself to it. It took me 2 years. I wasn't used to writing the narrative style. I was used to writing philosophy, and that's as easy as falling off a log. But writing narrative, I always admired novelists, you see, because of their gift of the portrayal of human character and of telling stories. And I got sucked into it. Slowly, slowly, slowly. It was very hard.
Do you consider yourself an intellectual, or?
Yes.
So there's nothing terrible about that term in your vocabulary.
No, not at all. I think that although some people think that my position is anti-intellectual, they don't understand that to be effective intellectually, you have to interpose thinking with intervals of mental silence when you stop thinking altogether. Because, after all, if I don't stop talking, I can't hear what you have to say. And then thinking, in my definition, is talking to oneself or figuring to oneself in one's skull. And if you don't occasionally...
No, not gender inequality. Gender diversity is the word I was going to use, but it's not right. But
I don't want to be equal to a man.
no, but I was taught that it is not healthy for a man to pay for everything.
Okay, and then, well, you are in a relationship, but I'm gonna ask you, how's that working for you?
How is it working for me? We split everything.
Well, you're gay, dude. I'm sorry. I think, well, and how do, okay, no, let me ask you this.
Let me
How
just say
does
one-
that make you
No.
feel?
It's not attractive, honestly, for a woman. I think 90% of women, the standard is for a man to be the financial.
Okay, I mean, all I was saying is that for my generation and my peer group where I grew up, me and all of my friends grew up learning that basically the opposite of that. And my girlfriend was taught by her single mother that it's not healthy to have to rely on a man for everything. So when we got together, she made it very clear that she wanted to split stuff with me. We would start going down
my
on dates. She said,
ex-wife.
I'm going to pay for this one. And so I just think it's funny when people are on Clubhouse.
Ew, my ex-wife. Ew, my ex-wife.
I think that obviously.
Ew, my ex-wife.
And I think it's worth acknowledging, yeah, for thousands of years, men have been the breadwinner, men have taken care of the family. But for the past few generations, at least in America, at least in my peer group, we were taught that that's evidence of toxic masculinity. So we were taught to not
Yeah, you were
do
indoctrinated.
that. Yeah, fine.
That's why.
But listen,
That's what I was.
Ishmael, okay, you're doing 50-50. Now I want to understand, how does that make you feel as a man? Forget about the comfort of having 50% of your expenses covered. How does that make you feel?
It doesn't, I don't think about it as a man at all. It doesn't make me feel differently as a man.
Okay, how do you feel if your wife makes more money than?
I don't think that I would be threatened by that. Do you think that all men should always make more money than all women?
No,
May I
I
ask you, is your girlfriend very driven and like a strong, independent woman?
Yeah, but I think that that's my point, is that she's not out of the norm when it comes to that. I think that many people who were either members of Gen X or like my girlfriend is a millennial who was raised by Gen X.
Don't get ahead of yourself. So, do you guys, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna ask this, but you don't have to.
Do you guys think that Ishmael is gay?
Hold on. Is your sexual life hot?
Bro, don't get me started. You want to talk to me about sex? Do you want to know what I can do? Do you want to know what I do?
No. I don't want to.
Do you want to know how big it is?
No. I don't want to know about the details of your sexual relationship.
All
I
communicate.
just want to know
Whoever hates
whether
the
We
most
have
loses.
some problems in our relationship, but they are not caused by.
No, I'm talking about the sex.
Let me finish my sentence. We have problems in our relationship, but they are not caused by either diversity of financial responsibility or sexual incompatibility. Our
Okay,
problems are
so-
caused by other things.
Okay, so I'm gonna because I'm trying to do the analysis here. So I was reading this book that is talking about the polarity in our relationship, and it's not about man or woman, but a feminine and a masculine.
Stop that activity.
And so
You don't have anything to
need
think about except thoughts. So you get unrelated to the real universe.
A couple of your students, you might say, began a thing called Esalen, which is familiar to a lot of us.
They were students not only of me, this must be emphasized. Michael Murphy and Dick Price, who really started Esalen, were also students of Frederick Spiegelberg and Michael of Sri Aurobindo. And influence of us all together inspired them to start this thing.
Do you think that growth centers like Esalen, do you think that they may be truly anti-intellectual in a certain way? Or do you think they may be sensitivity training, maybe the training of the emotions and the openness of the emotions, and perhaps leave out intellectual?
No. The thing is absolutely fascinating what's happening. Esalen has very scrupulously avoided taking a partisan point of view to any one discipline.
Or feminine as well, or you're being masculine as well, because then you will not have that compatibility sexually. And that's the reason I was asking.
Hi, this is Tiffany Sotheby. If I can interrupt you and just say that all communication is hypnosis, the more you think, the more you speak, the further from the truth we're gonna get.
Oh, God. Anyway. That was my point.
Although they've had very powerful people there, like the late Fritz Perls, who could have dominated the whole scene. But it never happened. Now, they are equally interested in the strictly intellectual life. For example, next March, the great British mathematician, philosopher Spencer Brown, author of Laws of Form, is coming, and he's going to give a seminar there for 10 days for a select group of some of the finest intellects in the United States. And they support that as much as they do sensitivity training and so on.
So you think they're combining?
Yes, I mean these places are the new universities. The university itself has become practically obsolete. It's a machine shop for turning out.
And there are now hundreds of these growth centers.
There are over 100 in North America.
Do you think they'll replace the university, or will there be a place for a straight university?
There will be a place for a straight university. There has to be, because people need certain kinds of technical training, which they can only get there. But I hate to say this in a democracy, but the intellectual elite will eventually emerge from the growth centers.
It's not possible they could combine the two kinds of training.
Well, the universities are interested. There's no doubt. I mean, let's not put them down too far. Life is not a black and white situation, and we have some very great universities and great scholars.
But what about the other great social institution, at least it used to be, the church? And will these growth centers replace the church?
Ah, tricky.
4 out of 10 stars. 4 out of 10 stars, nigga.
I don't know. They are stimulating the church. Let's put it that way. See, the problem with the church and the synagogue is that they're too talkative. You go to church on Sunday and they lecture God on what he's supposed to do as if he didn't know. Then they lecture the people on what they should do as if they could or would. And it's incessant chatter. And I'm trying to persuade the church to cultivate mental silence. And I'm having some success, funnily enough, because the church is desperate. No other reason than it's desperate financially.
Well, then, really, you mentioned what I consider the house number when you said silence.
You know that she's incessantly chattering and has no mental silence.
And the cultivation of silence. You are an admirer of Krishnamurti. He's one of the people you speak most highly of in your autobiography. And he, of course, is an advocate of mental silence completely. But he also says in many ways and in many places that one shouldn't cultivate it. It can't be cultivated.
It can't be cultivated.
So how are we to proceed from here?
First of all, if you try to cultivate it and find out that you can't stop the internal turbulence in your mind, what is called in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the chitta vritti. He defines yoga, which means union or integration of yourself with the universe. He says yogas chitta vritti nirodha. That means yoga is the cessation of babble in the mind. Now, you can't stop it, no matter what you do. But if you realize that you can't stop it, you get the message, which is that you don't exist. That's why you can't stop it. That your ego is nothing more than a concept. It's an abstraction like the equator. And nobody will trip over the equator. So your ego is your concept of yourself. And so that concept cannot stop the babble in the mind. Now, as soon as you realize that, the babble stops of itself. As when you simply listen to pure sound. See, that's essentially the method of yoga. It's called mantra.
Krishnamurti, of course, wouldn't identify it as
Yes,
yoga.
but he always starts out every talk by saying it is extremely important to listen. Will you please listen? And he's trying to say, listen to the sound of my voice rather than any instructions I have to give you. Please participate in the real world. Listen, 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 and you will discover, if you truly listen, that the sound and the listener are the same process. There isn't a dichotomy of I listening on the one hand and the sound being listened to on the other. The Krishnamurti has a terrible time explaining what he means. He's worked at it for years and years and years and published volumes of talks and so on. And I know what he's talking about. And I'm trying to say the same thing in a slightly different style. See, I think Krishnamurti is too serious. He doesn't allow laughter at his lectures.
It is important.
But I love him. I think he's a great man. I always allow laughter at my lectures. If we get into an uproar, because there was a great Zen master in the States by the name of Joshu Sasaki, and he recommends for a method of meditation that every morning you stand up, put your hands on your hips with the wrists upwards, and roar with laughter for 5 minutes. And imagine if Mr. Nixon did that. Imagine if the Queen of England, or Mr. Heath did that, or Mr. Kosygin, or the Emperor of Japan, or Mao Zedong. And then, when you think about that, you laugh all over again.
So maybe you can't talk directly about silence. You have to do things like laugh or...
Right.
Or
yes, you have to get into nonverbal experience. Because the real world is nonverbal.
But do you still maintain that there's some value in traditional religious forms and practices? I mean, Krishnamurti throws them all out and said, but I sense with you some sort of, whether it's nostalgia or what, some sort of feeling that...
I wouldn't throw them out. I would understand them in a slightly different way, though, from the way in which they are generally understood. In other words, when I go to church, I don't expect by attending Mass that I will get some advantage from the power of God, that he will do something special for me, like get me an increase in salary. I don't even listen to the prayers. I listen to the sound of the priest's voice. That's why the Roman Catholic Church made a serious mistake in having the Mass said in the vernacular. They should have kept it in Latin. I was brought up in England, as has been indicated, and we boys were subjected to the most amazing religion of lecturing God. Almighty and most merciful God, King of kings and Lord of lords, the only ruler of princes, who dost from thy throne behold all dwellers upon earth, most heartily we beseech thee from thy throne to behold our most gracious sovereign King George the King.
That's good.
And all the royal family, endue them plenteously with heavenly gifts, health and wealth, long to live, when all this is the language of court flattery. Because God was idolized, conceived in the image of a cosmic monarch.
Well, why is it that you went into the church at a certain point in your life for 5 years?
As an absolutely knowing subversive. But although it worked in a way, but I couldn't sustain the role of a clergyman in those days. Today it's different, but in those days I was much too much of a bohemian to wear the Roman collar and the black suit and come on like I was holier than thou. It just didn't work.
In the Zen idea of nothing special, you mentioned that Suzuki sometimes would sign his letters, no special person.
Bujinin.
Seems to be the finest antidote to the holier than thou.
Oh, yes.
Do you feel that way about yourself? Do you feel that you're nothing special?
Oh, I do it in a slightly different way than Suzuki.
I thought so.
Everybody knows, it's matter of public knowledge, that I'm a rascal. That I drink too much, that I sleep with too many women, that even people go so far as to say that I'm trying to commit suicide. Because Americans are terribly serious. They don't understand certain things that are understood in Europe and Asia about the joyous life. They are always wanting that everything you do is supposed to be good for you. Now, life is bad for you. As Jung pointed out, he was joking. He said life is a disease with a very bad prognosis. It lingers on for years and invariably ends with death. And, everybody, mental health, everybody is after you for your best interests. And I'm sick of being pursued for my best interests.
Since there's no you anyway to have these interests.
Sure, right. But everybody's concerned. Everybody is worried about one's health, one's mortality. Because, you see, the fallacy is this, that you must understand, if you're going to survive elegantly, you must not feel a compulsion to survive. Confucius put it very well. A man who understands the Tao, that is the course of nature, in the morning, can die with content in the evening. And so when anyone has a compulsion to survive, we say, well, I've got to go on living because I'm responsible. I have all these children to
handout
support.
in lunchroom for clowns.
But thereby, by taking that attitude, I teach my children the same attitude.
Useless tree.
And they go on compulsively surviving for their children. And everybody lives life as a drag. So, if we would realize that we really don't have to go on living,
chat box.
there is actually no reason why we should continue. We're not under orders.
Well, have you already gone away, so to speak? I mean, presumably, if there's no individual ego and one sees it clearly, one has died.
Well, if you ask me, have I gone away? You see, that's a somewhat paradoxical question.
Green bean mods from hell.
Because then I would be taken credit for being an egoistic non-ego. You know,
it's hard to
yes, it's hard to put it into our language because we've got a language constructed in such a way that it's a perpetual trap, and you can't say these things.
But presumably, you can carry on a full articulated life without thinking that it's a you or
yes. Oh, of course you could. And it's much more fun than the other kind of life. And
it's like sitting in on a course, not for credit. I find
that's right. Now that's a very good comparison. Yes.
I feel very often I'm not taking life for credit.
That's right. That's a very good comparison. Yes.
What about this California dreaming that you do? I mean, in your book, California takes on proportions, almost mythic proportions in a way. Big Sur and the people there, and the fact that you find that in that geographical location, you've found something right for you, a kind of a final place.
Yes. Because it's an extremely dangerous place to live as a result of the combination of the San Andreas Fault and the Governor Reagan. But it's the most beautiful place in that it is the American version of the
Rangers Clownhouse words equals
made my living
program,
if I lived
emotional
in
transfer, and
Tony,
time suck.
Or Ayers. Because I can't make a living at my profession in any country except the United States.
Today on Make It Mine, we meet Brookdale resident Peggy Gallant. As a 96-year-old, Peggy's lived through the...
And therefore, California is the nearest thing to that southwestern sunlight landscape that I always sought from boyhood. And
I'm from California myself, and I feel a kind of nostalgia, but I wonder whether it's just nostalgia sometimes, or whether there's something, where there's a kind of a holy land going on there somehow.
oh, there is.
Mm.
It's one of the most stimulating spiritual and intellectual climates that there is.
Mm. I'd say equaled only by New York City.
Yes, I mean, here, naturally, there is also a tremendous gathering of fascinating people.
But there's a nature seems to be more
Nature is more benign.
Yeah.
New York City has a rather tough climate, and that's why. Also, it's too industrialized.
Mm. I wanted to ask you a couple of things that people might just want to ask, because it's topmost in their minds. And in your book, you said finally your final feeling about LSD, roughly speaking, is that when you get the message, you hang up the phone. Is that where you stand?
Yes, I mean, I would say that from my own personal point of view, if all the LSD in the world were to vanish tomorrow, I wouldn't regret it, because I think I've learned everything from that kind of experience that it has to teach.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that a whole generation of people now have done the learning for the society? Do you suppose that certain people can completely bypass the LSD experience, building on the experience of others, or do you think it's good for everyone to get lost in the woods?
That's a difficult question to answer. I don't really know the answer to that. LSD was a valuable catalyst in showing people that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in your philosophy, to quote Hamlet. Dangerous, and all the more dangerous when suppressed, and when one couldn't be sure that the LSD you were getting was the real thing.
Prohibition is absolutely no good. There's no question of that.
I can't understand American prohibitionism, because it corrupts the police by asking them to be armed clergymen.
Jesus Christ equals nothing.
But it seems to me that, as opposed to the early 60s and 50s, that there are a lot of people in the society today who are deeply into their consciousness through meditative techniques of one kind or another.
Yes.
And there's also a fashion tending in that direction. In other words, people are aware of it. It's not an outrageous thing.
Don't put it down by calling it a fashion.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
In fact, could I ask you, do you think there is some sort of new age of spirit dawning, or do you think, or
whether it's a new age, that may be too pompous a phrase to use, but there most decidedly is a colossal, I would call it spiritual awakening occurring in this country. It's as alive as all get out.
Down syndrome psych ward containment social industrial complex society.
Do you think it's indigenous? I mean, is it really indigenous, or is it sustained by people coming from the East and Japan?
It's both. It's a result of global intercommunication. We're in a situation now where, by means of technological transportation and by telephonic and television and electronic communication, we've got one world. We can't help it. And therefore, all the cultures of the world are merging. And this stimulates every culture.
You mentioned, again, I'm quoting you roughly, you feel that psychotherapy is largely a bore, except for most Jungians. You would accept them. Do you think that that spiritual life in the largest sense will begin to replace psychotherapy?
Well, the psychotherapists themselves are undergoing a great deal of evolution. We have, for example, the Journal of Humanistic Psychology, the Journal of Transpersonal
Must
Psychology,
present the future
where the
of
most
time travel
extraordinary
because you
interesting
can't have
material
the
is being
IQ
published.
flies.
And I know all sorts of people in the field of psychotherapy who are no longer, what shall I call it? Who are no longer preoccupied with what I always felt to be a very shallow view of the good life. Of, you know,
Well, do you think that...
are you in touch with reality when reality is considered as the world seen on a bleak Monday morning? Well, reality is a trip from the maternity ward to the crematorium. You know, that kind of thing, where they ask you to test your sanity. What is 9 and 7?
I don't know.
For heaven's sakes, but that's it. Or are you in a fit condition to drive a car? That's become a test of sanity, you see. I know, it's terrible.
Well, do you think that perhaps like universities, which evolve and become turned on, that psychotherapy can do the same thing, and there could be a
oh yes.
So there's a place for for both of them in the society.
Indeed there is. There are, I mean, let me not, again, I want to repeat this, not put the university as an institution down, because marvelous things are now happening in our universities. I am astonished at the response I can get from universities in the terms of enormous audiences for lectures on the Chinese theory of nature, some very far out subject of that kind.
So it sounds like the structures of society are hanging in there. They're going to persist, and perhaps they're okay and growing.
But what we've got going wrong is we've got a kind of bifurcation. You take your classified telephone directory and open up churches and have a ruler in your hand, and you will find that far the longest space is occupied by authoritarian Bible-banging churches. And these people are barbarians who take the written word of the Bible literally, because they need terribly, they have a personal need for something to depend on.
Do you think the same kind of barbarianism of the spirit is represented in our government? I mean, do you think
the government, you see, realizes that there is a very large number of people like that, and therefore, to keep their votes, they have to pander to those kind of people. And these are the boys who never grew up. They always need Papa.
Well, what's the possibility for, what's going to be the outcome of these two different trends, this kind of in the society? Do you think that?
Well, the trouble is that the boys who always need Papa are violent. They have the guns, and
you know, like you are fully into something or not into something. So it's different than a man.
That's a brilliant thing. To be fair, Isa, women are also obsessed with things that we consider trivial or unimportant.
Yeah, it's because what I just
for
said.
that reason. Like looks and nails and people's emotions that have nothing to do with us and what other people think of them and their reputations. I cannot believe this room is so dogmatically like as if there's this. It's not dogma. Not the thing women do that all women care about. That's not dogma.
Types of people who like to be soldiers, policemen, tough guys, and therefore they have a great deal of power. Although I must say, recently
it's nasty and junky. Like, hey, Ismail, please me though. Point is, guys, there's no one thing. All men don't do one thing. All women don't do one thing. Just to suggest that all men don't take the same responsibility with their children in the same manner. Never said all. Never said all. Appreciation. Wonderful. Great addition. Thank you. And somebody said earlier, Thank you. Can
Why
someone say
are you
anything
being
else?
so mean to him?
Had a long talk with the general of the army, who was a Virginian gentleman who was extremely intelligent. I was quite shocked to find out how wise he was. And I've even been invited by the Air Force.
Next people, whoever, if you're interrupting when someone's speaking, you go to the audience. I don't want that to happen because I like most people on the stage.
Thank you, Kitover. I was just simply saying that when Sig was up early here saying women should act a certain way, men should act a certain way, women are expected to act a certain way, men are expected, it's a natural thing. But we know it's not a natural thing. It's what your society says, what your family says, what your identity says, what the identity is put upon you says.
Challenge
Because all
for
women
any
don't act
moderator
one
to
way.
lead us in a
All
prayer
men
for
don't act
peace
one way.
in
I
our
am very
lives
interested to
and in
read
the
that or
world.
hear about that book that Issa said. So there might be some scientific reality around, do women dream or anything when they're asleep? Do they behave differently? That sounds interesting to me because maybe there is some sort of...
To lecture at the great Air Force Academy.
You mean there's a Buddha nature in a general?
Oh, yes.
Hmm.
I've lectured at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and also at the Air Force Weapons Research Institute in Albuquerque. And some of those officers are brilliant men. But somehow something's wrong with their strategy. They don't know where they want to go.
I have to say this is WBAI in New York, and maybe that's a good time to ask, considering the listenership of BAI and their own political standpoint, do you think would you be accused of being a counter-revolutionary?
I'm apolitical, actually, although I'm tremendously interested in certain specific political problems. I can't buy any party or ideology.
In one sentence.
I'm not sure whether the right wing...
Strict no interruption thing, but people are going to have to be way more brief if we're going to do that.
The left wing is a greater threat to my freedom.
I agree with that.
Mayor? Oh, he's not there.
Can a
Mayor, are you there? He's what?
person
Okay, never mind.
non-ego and silence and still be engaged in political life?
Oh, yes, definitely. In other words, you can't be effectively...
It's all nurture. There's no such thing as nature. Women and men have the exact same brain. We have the exact same anatomy. And it's all made of stuff. It's all... I know he didn't say it. I'm saying it. It's all,
You think it's all nurture versus nature? How could it be all nurture versus nature? That's an all or nothing position.
Fine, man.
Engaged in political life unless you do practice mental silence. Gary Snyder puts it very well. He says you can't work well for ecological causes unless you realize in the first place that it's not necessary to do anything about it. But if you realize that in the first place, that in other words, the universe is automatically harmonious, if you understand that, that gives you tremendous energy to do all sorts of things.
And Gary got highest praise in your book. I mean,
Yes.
You said that you wished you could claim him as your,
That's my
your
disciple.
spiritual successor.
Yeah, right.
Yet nonetheless, he seems to be immersed in a more traditional Zen and a more traditional practice than you. Is it true?
Not entirely. No. He is. He's all that. But he takes with a light heart. He doesn't come on stuffy about it.
Didn't take it for credit.
No, he didn't take it for credit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In your book, in general, it seems that you have a kind of non-interest in the occult and the psychic phenomena.
Yeah.
Is that a Zen background?
Yes.
That makes you that way? You
Somewhat. Yes. Zen people are not interested in that.
Well, what about the idea that various Hindu practices take the consciousness into higher chakras, whereas the Zen practice keeps it in the hara, and that might account to some extent for the difference, because Indian spirituality is really very far out in comparison to
well, so yes and no. I mean, some of the people I know who are well into Hindu practice, Baba Ramdas, formerly Richard Alpert, Bhagavan Das, Swami Sachidananda, I find extremely companionable.
And they don't seem to be too concerned with the
No,
psychic
they
sphere.
don't spook you with miracles and all that kind of thing.
So maybe being down to earth then is a characteristic of any sort of spiritual
Yes,
person.
because you realize that what we call earth is not away from it. Tattvamasi, you're it right now. Earth is it. And I find these people, the contemporary bunch of what I'd call bhakti yogins, very enjoyable. But the only thing I'm critical of is their attitude about celibacy. They don't all have it. Because I think a person who goes for celibacy, by not exercising his sexual functions, tends to become cruel. And that we need to exercise those functions just as we need vitamins and exercise and breathing and all that kind of thing.
But sometimes exercising the sexual functions doesn't guarantee that one will be compassionate.
No, it doesn't guarantee anything. But I do think that if you don't do it, you tend to become uptight.
Is that a generality? Would you make certain exceptions? I mean, for instance, you mentioned a humorous episode with having tea with Swami Prabhavananda in California.
Well,
obviously he's not cruel. I mean, maybe there some other effects have occurred through lifelong celibacy.
I don't want to speak of Swami Prabhavananda
no,
personally.
But cases like that. Thomas Merton or something like this. I mean, there have been some. There
are people. I have several friends who don't really seem to have any strong sexuality.
I see.
Just like.
Step into summer with Tamu's new sandals for free. Their outer layer is made of high-quality material with a breathable lining, and their soles are soft and flexible, providing superior comfort, perfect for any terrain. They're your must-have for every excursion. Cop a pair from Tamu.
Only for new app users with qualifying orders.
Some people aren't really interested in food. These are very rare people. But I only object when they try to impose their ideas on everybody else.
And if someone is interested in food, why restrain it and torture it?
Sure.
I see that. Well, suppose you were to say that something I consider this sort of the two foci of your position, that if it can be called a position, that there is no ego, therefore everything is attained. I mean, the beatitude is now.
Yes.
Now, can someone hear that instantly and be enlightened?
Sometimes, yes. For most people, you see, it needs some explanation. That what we call the ego is a combination of two factors. On the one hand, it's your opinion of yourself, your image of yourself, your idea of yourself, which has been brainwashed into you since you were a baby. This corresponds, on the other hand, to a certain sensation. And this sensation is one of chronic muscular strain, which we were taught when, in the beginning, Mama said, "Darling, try to go to sleep." Or the teacher said, "Pay attention. Take a careful look at this. Now listen carefully. and one does a muscular tension in order to achieve a neurological result, and this tension is useless. It's like when you're taking off on a jet plane and you think you've gone too far down the runway and the damn thing ought to be up in the air, you start pulling at your seatbelt. Now, there's a chronic strain in everybody's muscles. It may be sometimes located between the eyes, sometimes in the heart center, sometimes in the solar plexus, and sometimes in the rectum. And it's holding together. Now, I say, pull yourself together. There. Now, that is a completely useless muscular effort to attain a neurological result. But that is chronic, and it becomes associated with the image of yourself, and therefore corresponds to what you mean by I. Whereas, in fact, I is like EYE. It's an aperture through which the universe is examining itself. And it is always basically unconscious of itself, for the same reason that you can't bite your own teeth or kiss your own lips. The universe really, just as the edge of a sword doesn't cut the edge of a sword, the universe doesn't need to know itself, that is to say, make itself an object. Because when you make anything an object, it becomes objectionable. This is a very curious aspect of modern history, that the 19th century, 18th century mythology, which we call scientific naturalism, made a great point of taking an objective attitude to everything. And finally, taking an objective attitude to the human mind, as in B.F. Skinner. See, the mind is an object. And thus there is no subject left. Well, then everything becomes objectionable, and we invent the hydrogen bomb to blow it all up. Suicide is the end of a purely objective world.
So do you feel it now, that silence? Or can you admit to it?
Oh, yes. It's a constant undercurrent.
Can one have seen this, or felt the silence, and then still have the babble go on?
Yes.
So one doesn't have to have a total silence to have.
No. If you can't meditate in a boiler factory, you can't meditate.
What if the boiler factory is inside your skull? I mean,
even so. It's like space behind the stars. You can't have any stars without space.
When we listen, we are unconfined, free to travel the world inside our minds. There's more to imagine when we listen. Audible.
And so there is always in the background of whatever goes on in my head, let's supposing I'm absolutely scared stiff, I've got cancer or the Great Siberian Itch. Nevertheless, far, far in the back of my mind, there is an incredible serenity of eternal silence. But it isn't nothing, it isn't negative in the ordinary way in which Western people think of it. We don't understand in the West that you can't have something without nothing. Nothing is tremendously important. It's the mother. It's the womb of the universe. And it's space. It's, as St. Thomas Aquinas put it, the silent pause which gives sweetness to the chant.
Did that serene space you you're in touch with, did you achieve that serenity through anything that you've done in your life?
One doesn't achieve it, you see. That is sort of asking the wrong question. There's a famous story about an American visiting England who wanted to find the village of Upper Tottenham. And he asked a yokel, "What's the way to Upper Tottenham? Do you know where it is?" And he scratched his head and said, "Well, sir, I know where it is, but if I were you, I wouldn't start from here." And so in the same way, one doesn't quite speak of achieving it, because you have to understand first that there is no separate you to achieve it.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what one does.
What one does is mostly empty motions.
Mm.
But when you understand that, however, look, this is the point that people need to understand. When you understand that, you can act creatively, because you act with the whole energy of the universe behind you.
How do you respond when someone says to you, well, you say that there is this total serene space which underlines everything, but that's merely intellectual knowledge. People are saying that all the time.
But it isn't intellectual knowledge. I mean, you can't put it into words. Intellectual knowledge is what you can put into words. This is a feeling. One might almost say a concrete sensation.
Why is it talked of as insight then in the Prajnaparamita, if it's a feeling?
Because well, insight is an English word.
Prajna then.
Prajna means intuitive wisdom. The fundamental sense of life. Now, we can't talk about it because it's ineffable. That means, in Greek, what cannot be spoken, in the same way as mysticism comes from the Greek verb muin, mu, which is the finger on the lips, or as we say, mum's the word. There's something that can't be told, and that's what's important.
Mu.
Mu. All about our wayward, cobbled lanes enclosed by roofed walls with covered gates, giving entrance to courtyards and gardens, and interspersed with small shops and restaurants. It was April, and under such a gate we took refuge from a sudden shower. The gate opened a few inches, and out came a hand proffering an umbrella. And as soon as we took it, the hand was withdrawn, and the gate closed. The umbrella was a casa, made of oiled paper, a wide circle spread out like a small roof, supported on a cone of thin bamboo, almost as cozy as carrying your own house with you in a quiet, heavy rain. Gutters were bubbling, and water was spilling from bronze, dragon-mouthed gargoyles at roof corners. Everywhere the soft clattering of wooden sandals, like small benches with legs on the soles to keep your feet above water. Courtyards with glistening evergreen bushes and floating branches of bright green maple. The smell of Japanese cooking, soy sauce and hot sake, mixed with damp earth, and the faintest suggestion, pleasant in that small a dosage, of the benjo or toilet, which, because of the diet, smells quite different from ours.
I am a dog. I am a cat.
The difficulty is that our waking and attentive consciousness scans the world myopically. One thing, one bit, one fragment after another, so that our impressions of life are strung out in a thin, scrawny thread, lining up small beads of information, whereas nature itself is a stupendously complex pattern, where everything is happening all together, everywhere, at once. What we know of it is only what we can laboriously line up and review along the thread of this watchfulness. Better not to interfere with myself. It could set off an earthquake. Perhaps there is an entirely different way of being responsible and compassionate. The first step is to make tea for wakefulness. And for this there is nothing better than matcha, the finely powdered green tea used for ceremonial tea drinking. A small amount is put in the bottom of a roughly glazed bowl, covered with hot water, and whirled into a jade-green froth with a bamboo whisk. Although it tastes vaguely of Guinness stout, it smells of straw matting and freshly planed wood. And then I begin to rub ink easily back and forth on a black stone cut like a small swimming pool, with a short, deep end and a long, shallow end, and filled with water. It takes 15 minutes or more, during which there is nothing in my consciousness except the increasingly oily texture of the liquid, the mountain forest smell of the incense, and the continuing sound of soft rain on the roof. Wide awake, but with hardly a thought in my head, I stroke and roll the brush in the black liquid, and then with a certain unhurried suddenness, write 10 Chinese characters on a long scroll of absorbent paper. They say, in the midst of the rain, seeing the sun, from the depths of the fire, spooning clear water. Zen meditation is a trickily simple affair, for it consists only in watching everything that is happening, including your own thoughts and your breathing, without comment. After a while, thinking or talking to yourself drops away, and you find that there is no yourself other than everything which is going on, both inside and outside the skin. Your consciousness, your breathing, and your feelings are all the same process as the wind, the trees growing, the insects buzzing, the water flowing, and the distant prattle of the city. The trick, which cannot be forced, is to be in this state of consciousness all the time, even when you are filling out tax forms or being angry. As the Zen poem says, the bamboo shadows sweep the stairs, but raise no dust. The big realization for which all systems strive is not a future attainment, but a present fact. That this now moment is eternity, and that one must see it now or never. For right now, our problematic ego cannot be found. When Buddhists look very deeply into themselves, they ask, but who is looking? They come up with an answer which has been hard to understand, essentially because of a language problem. For the Japanese word ku, translating the Sanskrit shunya, has the sense of sky, space, or emptiness, but when it is used for the root of one's own consciousness, it means also the finally mysterious and inconceivable. Not so much emptiness or darkness. Ku is therefore clarity, as of vision or hearing, and nothing is so mysterious as clarity. For exactly what is
1978. We were the hottest pleasure palace in Miami. The cocaine war stopped at our entrance. Enjoy your stay.
Let's play Find the DEA agent at the bar.
Your brother's the biggest trafficker in Miami.
We went our separate ways.
I'm gonna need you to reestablish your connection.
You're gonna have to prove something.
I remind you that you're trying to keep your family together.
I will come to learn a hard Miami lesson. Every pleasure has a price.
Hi, this is Tiffany Sotheby. This is Mental Health, Pride, Power, Joy. Thanks for being here.
Create content for people and search engines with SEMrush SEO Writing Assistant. Get your copy SEO ready.
For exactly what is clarity itself? Could it be well-defined form? Crystal clear form? Then, as the Heart Sutra says, Ku is Shiki. Transparency is form. All of a sudden, it will strike you that this nothingness is the most potent, magical, basic, and reliable thing you ever thought of. And that the reason you can't form the slightest idea of it is that it's yourself. Oh, but not the self you thought you were. we should not risk untying our conceptual moorings unless we are prepared to weather considerable confusion and anxiety. But once the critical point of the flip is passed and the identity of form and void is clear, one's consciousness of form is in the clear. That's to say, when grounded on nothingness, one's zest for life is astonishing. Any book will do for studying Zen, says the Roshi Morimoto. You can use the dictionary, or Alice in Wonderland, even the Bible. There's no real point in going to all the trouble to translate our old Chinese texts about Zen. Not if you're serious about understanding Zen. The sound of rain needs no translation. In this universe, everything flows backwards from the present and vanishes like the wake of a ship. The present comes out of nothing, and you cannot hear any self that is listening. This can be done with all the senses, but most easily with the ears. Simply listen then to the rain. And when you have really heard the sound of rain, you can hear and see and feel everything else in the same way, needing no translation.
Alan, in an instant, what is it that needs no translation?
So, Issa, welcome to Mental Health Pride, Power Joy. I hope you liked my tongue lashing in the chat. Did you like my poetry?
Why would I like you showing me like that?
It's just chat. It's to show you that I can manipulate your brain with words.
But it was funny. I mean, you didn't hurt my feelings or anything.
Oh, well, that's because you
I
have.
was just wondering why you were doing that, but you were being dumb.
Well, that's what I do. I try to play the fool. So I'm finishing up a meditation. I have 8 minutes left. This has been an Alan Watts production. This is a sutra. It finishes up in 7 minutes. I'm going to finish it if you want to listen to it. If you want to come back, it'll be finished in 7 minutes.
Purushotama, and this has been In the Spirit. We offer our gratitude again to Alan Watts for coming to the studio this morning to give us a glimpse of his life of spiritual experiment. And we thank Pantheon Books for Alan's autobiography, In My Own Way. We offer our deepest gasho to Tai-san, now Edoshi, spiritual leader of the New York Zendo, for his chanting of the Heart Sutra. Those of you who wish to experience, if only for one evening, the very pure and intense atmosphere of Japanese Zen should visit the New York Zendo any Thursday evening. The Zendo opens at 6:15. The telephone number of the New York Zendo is 628-9652. That's the Zendo, 628-9652. We also thank the members of Arika Institute, students of the Chilean spiritual master Oscar Ichazo, who is now living in the city, for tastes of their utterly spontaneous musical expression, which is available on LP record. The telephone of the Arika Institute is 489-7430. Another marvelous opportunity for Buddhist meditation in the city is offered by Dharma Datu, the center of Trungpa Rinpoche, the brilliant Tibetan meditation master. The group meets Thursdays and Tuesdays at 7 p.m. at 12 East 18th Street. The telephone number for the New York Dharma Datu is 989-4792. That's 989-4792. And two disciples of Trungpa Rinpoche will be coming on this program next week. Finally, we want to recommend most highly the meditation seminar to be conducted by the Sufi master Pir Vilayat Khan. This man is sweet, articulate, open, and deep. His seminars cover a wide range of meditative possibilities and are fruitful for both beginners and advanced people of all spiritual paths.
In these list of marvelous institutions and people, I would also like to add the marvels of an extraordinary place in the city called the Church of St. Mary the Virgin, which is on West 46th Street near Times Square. Go in there and absorb the atmosphere. It's absolutely incredible.
The Joe Rogan.
And making those are people who are not going to find problems with the product because they're paying for their boats, they're paying for their mortgages, they're paying for their kids' education. I'm making sure that as many of those vaccines are sold as possible. So let's make kids take them, even though there's no data that show they help kids. Let's make pregnant women can take them. Make everybody take them because they're cashing in on it, and that the mercantile, ambitions have completely subsumed the regulatory function of those agencies, and that has to end. One of the things that we need to do too is to get rid of pharmaceutical advertising on television. There's only 2 countries in the world that allow it. One is New Zealand, the other is our country. Everybody who is knowledgeable is against it. It not only has compromised public health. We take largely because of that advertising. We take 3 or 4 times the amount of drugs as Europeans take. And drugs are the number 3 killer in our country. Pharmaceutical drugs, the number 3 killer after cancer and heart attacks. They're not making us healthier. We spend more on healthcare, 4.3 trillion than any country in the world, and we have the worst health impacts. We're behind like Mongolia, Costa Rica, Cuba in terms of our health outcomes. All of these drugs, the pharmaceutical industry is not making us safer. It's not making us healthier. And we changed the rule in 1997. Prior to 1997, like cigarettes and liquor, you couldn't advertise on TV. We changed those rules, and FDA allowed the pharmaceutical companies to advertise, and they not only now have a platform from which they can tell everybody you're sick, you need this, you need that, but also they are able to dictate content on television. So they can dictate content on the, on the local
and on YouTube.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
that's a terrifying thing, and it's so deeply interwoven. The question that I would have to you is like, how do you untangle that?
Well, you can do one of these things at a time, and I'm going to go in there and do it. I'm going to issue an executive order on day one saying there's no more advertising on TV. Now, FDA needs to implement that through the regulatory process, but I also know how the regulatory process works, and I know how to hasten it. I know how to make it work faster for the American people. So, I'm looking forward to doing this. I'm looking forward to telling FDA you're not taking pharma money anymore.
All these controversial opinions that you have you had anyone debate you publicly about any of these?
Nobody will debate me. For 18 years, nobody will debate me. In fact, I've scheduled many, many debates, and I've asked Hotez many, many times to debate me. And I think you've asked him here, why don't you debate Robert Kennedy? And he said, because he's a cunning lawyer or something like that. But I've debated Hotez on the telephone with kind of a referee, and his science is just made up. He cannot stand by it. He can't cite studies.
Well, he was trying to tell me that vaccines don't cause autism. I said,
and his daughter has autism, and he wrote a book.
Yeah.
But I asked my daughter didn't get her autism from a vaccine, but I've read that book, and there is no science cited in that book. It's just him saying, it didn't happen. And listen, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and God bless him, and God bless that little girl, and I have nothing but good energy going to them, and but it's not. He's using her as a leverage to tell people there's no problem here.
But this is my point, that I asked him what does, and he said there's there's environmental factors they're aware of. I go, what are those? And he couldn't cite them.
Yeah.
Like, how can you be so sure to say this definitely doesn't, but you're telling me there's a bunch of environmental factors that do cause it, and we're aware of those factors, but you're not aware of them, and you're an expert in this?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
That's
he's a health expert.
That's the big question. That anybody who says it's not the vaccines, I'm like, okay, fine.
But they don't want. If you say it's not the vaccines, people go, good. That's what I wanted to hear. That's what I want to hear.
What is it?
When you say it is the vaccines, people go, oh my God, I don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear it, and they get angry. They get angry at you, and they go, oh, tinfoil hat, conspiracy theorist, and but the fact that no one will debate you speaks volumes, especially now. They can't say now that you're not popular. And what's crazy is that Biden now has decided he's not even going to debate anybody in the primary.
I'll just tell you one story. The Connecticut State Legislature had a bill to end the religious exemptions for childhood vaccines in Connecticut, and the head of the Democratic Party, the legislature, asked me to come out and debate a Yale professor in front of the legislature, and I said, great. I'm from the Yale Medical School. And he called back and said, there's going to be two of them, and it's against you, and they're going to get 2/3 of the time, and you get a third. And I said, fine. And then he called back and said, there's going to be 4 of them, and you each get 6 minutes. And I said, that's all I need. And it's not fair, but it's all I need. And so I fly out on a red eye. I get to the State House, and it's me and 4 empty chairs. Somebody told them, or they all decided, I don't know, not to show up. And that's happened to me again and again and again and again. I agree to debates, and it seems like somebody gets a message, but who knows? It's obscure. But nobody in 18 years has been willing to debate me.
What is that like to carry that around? I mean, I know you kind of described it earlier in the Sisyphus analogy, but it's got to be insanely frustrating. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, you really handle it incredibly well.
It's frustrating, but I mean, listen. I look at these some of my friends that I've made over time who have children who were affected, children who, were perfectly healthy kids who exceeded all their milestones, and then they lost everything when they're 2 years. And a lot of these kids are so severely affected, they'll never, hold a job. They'll never pay taxes. They'll never write a poem. They'll never throw a baseball. They'll never go out on a date with a girl or a boy. And they'll never serve in the military. Their lives are so constricted, and the parents' lives are also shattered. A lot of these parents, for most of them, because the children have these, severe anger and violence, and they have these tactile sensitivities and light sensitivities, and don't like strangers, that the parents can't go out. You can't get a babysitter to take care of that child. And the parents just stop going out on dates. A lot of them give up their jobs. Almost all of them, their careers are, really debilitated. And I see them going through that, and, anything that I go through is like nothing. So I don't, spend any time thinking of myself. I just don't get frustrated by it, because all I have to do is say, I'm here for those parents. And, and I'm lucky that, I don't have to fight that battle, because I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I could take it.
What pushed you to want to run for president?
I saw, I grew up so proud of this country and loving, this country and being proud. And, I grew up in a magical time in American history, which economists call the Great Prosperity. It's a time between 1947 and like 1980, when our country became the wealthiest country in the world. We developed the middle class like nothing that's ever been seen in history. That became this economic machine and a machine for democracy. And we were generating during that period half the wealth on the face of the earth we owned here in this country. Everybody wanted American things. America was, it was a moral authority around the world. It was a leader, and everybody wanted our leadership. They don't like our bullying, but they wanted our leadership, and they knew the difference. But they wanted, I would travel in Europe when I was a kid, and with my father and my mother, and people just adored our country. But people wanted blue jeans. They wanted American cars. They wanted Victrola, RCA Victrolas, and, our electronics, and they wanted our movies and our television, and and they wanted our democracy. And, I want my kids to grow up with that love for our country and that pride for our country. And I don't see the path from either political party getting us there at this point. I think, both parties have lost their way. And my party, the Democratic Party, has become a party of war. It's become the party of censorship. It's become the party of pharmaceutical companies, of, the neocons, this very aggressive, belligerent foreign policy, that's forever wars. And then, the kind of political suppression that we saw, and this bizarre turning our backs on the American middle class, which is democracy. If you don't have a middle class, you cannot. Any political scholar, political scientist will tell you that if you have a large aggregations of wealth at the top and widespread poverty below, that formulation is too unstable to support democracy. And the middle class has just been wiped out in this country, and nobody's talking about it. It's really, and I think that's why, Trump was so popular, is he was the one guy who's talking to those people. And, and he's saying, and they're angry because nobody's listening to him. And Trump said, I'm listening to you, and I'm going to go break things for you. And they are angry, and they want things to get broken. And I think My father used to look at Latin America, and it was the same thing back then. It was widespread poverty below, and it was, wealth above. And U.S. foreign policy was to sort of fortify those oligarchies and support with weapons, etc., the military juntas that were keeping those people in suppression because they were anti-communist. And my father said, there's going to be a revolution in those countries. And if we continue those policies, the communists are going to own the revolution, and they're going to own the future. And we have to give aid directly to the poor and stop giving it to the oligarchs and stop giving it to the military. And that's why my uncle and father started the Alliance for Progress and USAID to do something that had never done before, which is to develop middle class by funding the development of middle class and the poor. And I would say the same thing is happening in this country today, that where the oligarchs are running things and the military, and there's got to be a revolution, and either it can be owned by Donald Trump, or we can try to, marshal and mobilize that energy for a more idealistic vision of our country. And when my father ran in '68, he put together a populist coalition of left and right. And he was able to do that. He was able to do that by telling the truth to people, including truths that they didn't want to hear. And he was, on the last day that he died, the day he died, he won the most urban state in our country, which was California, and the most rural state, which was South Dakota. He had bridged the gap between, and when I was with him when he died in Los Angeles, and then we flew his body back on US-2 on, Humphrey's plane, Vice President Humphrey's plane to New York, and then we waved him in St. Patrick's Cathedral, and the crowds just, it was like a flood of humanity on that street. The whole street was blocked. People standing 10 feet deep for half a mile. And then we brought him from Penn Station in Washington. He was in the caboose in the coffin, and then there was a train that we took to Union Station in Washington, D.C. And the people on that train were the people who would have been probably one of the greatest governments in United States history. And that train ride was supposed to take 2.5 hours. It took 7.5 hours. Because there were 2 million people on the tracks, and they were white people, they were people in military uniforms, they were Boy Scouts standing, saluting. I remember passing a Little League field where all of the people, all the kids on both sides were standing, holding their gloves and saluting, and the coaches and all the people in the stand. There were Catholic priests, there was rabbis. I remember passing in Delaware. I was 14 at that time. A pickup truck that had 6 or 7 nuns in their habits standing in the bed of the truck, and they were waving rosaries and handkerchiefs at us. In the major urban centers, the train stations, we crept through at a crawl to avoid hitting people, but they were just jammed with people, almost all black people in Trenton and Newark and Baltimore and Wilmington. And they were singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. We had the windows open on the train, and then there were hippies and tie-dye T-shirts. You can go look at the people. There's photographs of the people riding that track. You can call them up over there, James, if you